What's going on YouTube? Username Kite562 here, and I have another episode of Sherlock Sundays for you. Now, these episodes will be every Sunday at 11 a.m. whenever I can get around to it. I'm trying to get this video up for October 8th, which is another Sunday. I think if I'm wrong on that, I'm wrong, but I'll let you know down in the community tab below. But again, every episode will be every Sunday at 11 a.m. whenever I get around to it. I'm only one guy running this channel, and this channel's just a hobby, so let's get on with my review of The Sign of the Four by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, with the plot, when Mrs. Morstan walks into the door of Sherlock Holmes' office of 221B Baker Street, a case of a missing Arthur Morstan, Miss Morstan's father, or Mary Morstan if you want to be more precise, turns into something deeper and darker. What could be the meaning of the Sign of the Four is what I'm asking you now. So I have to say, the first point that caught my eye is that Sherlock has a constant use of morphine and cocaine. While the story is told from John Watson's perspective, I still find it quite interesting. And that's from chapter 1, page 87 from my big all-in-one omnibus book, but for the thumbnail of this video I'm just going to use a digital cover so I don't have to lug that giant thing around. But anyway, the notable quote that I wanted to mention to you guys is, "Count the cost. Your brain may, as you say, be roused and excited. It is a pathological and morbid process which involved increased tissue change and may at least leave a permanent weakness." John Watson, The Sign of the Four, chapter 1, page 87. And I really like how Mr. Watson has a really deep concern for Mr. Holmes and his use of morphine and cocaine in these times, which I don't understand why somebody would use such a thing and such methods, but in my opinion it was just heartbreaking to see in general. So all in all, this is just a really intriguing side of seeing Mr. Sherlock go through something like this. And I just couldn't put it down. Like, a good chunk of the descriptions from the chapters, even though this is just a 12-chapter story, it got its point across, and it was a really enjoyable experience as a whole. And I have to say, for point 2 from The Sign of the Four that I wrote down, Sherlock is the last line or resort of a detective resource when Gregson, Lestrade, or Athelney Jones are out of their expertise. Sherlock is put up to the task to see how certain events play out, I should say, for the matter. So anyway, before the actual police get in, Sherlock Holmes is the last line of defense before they have to intervene, basically, is what The Sign of the Four is trying to explain. And I would say for point number 3, apparently Watson's late brother's initials were HW were on the watch. John always carried this watch with him. John is always shocked to know that Sherlock could gather such information from just an ordinary looking watch if one doesn't observe the details, while also figuring out John's brother was an alcoholic who died in poverty. And this was on pages 90 and 91, chapter 1, The Science of Deduction, The Sign of the Four. And what's really interesting is that Sherlock found out that this watch was notably cleaned before it was handed to him. Which, I mean, the skill of observation can be a really useful thing for people. I mean, as a whole, it can really change the perspective on how you see the surroundings around you as a whole as well. So I have to say, for point number 4, so Sherlock last week was contacted by a person named Francois Le Billard, and if I butcher that name, I apologize, who is a French detective. So Sherlock showed him this man cases from Riga in 1857 and a case in 1871. I noted that this man has quick intuition but deficient in exact knowledge to further develop his detective craft. However, this man does have the power of observation and deduction, kind of like how Sherlock does, but not as refined, in my opinion. So, as we continue on within the Sign of the Four story, Miss Morstan asks Holmes and Watson to help her figure out how her loving father, Captain Morstan, or Arthur Morstan if you want to be more specific, went missing on December 3rd, 1878, Chapter 2, The Statement of the Case, The Sign of the Four, page 93. So for point number 6, continuing on, Miss Morstan was settled into a boarding home in Edinburgh until she was 17. Since her mother died, however, her father was a high-ranking captain who got a year's worth of leave time to see his daughter, but the captain vanished, leaving only his luggage behind at the hotel that he was supposed to stay at. So continuing on Miss Morstan's statement, on May 4th, 1882, Miss Morstan published her address for an ad in the paper. After that, she told Mr. Holmes that she's been receiving boxes with a pearl inside of the box. Could this be a threat or a warning of some sort? Continue on and read the Sign of the Four is all I'm going to say. So anyway, for point number 8, Miss Morstan received a strange letter with no address received on July 7th. To meet the sender at the Lyceum Theater at 7 p.m. Bring no police, but she can bring 2 friends with her, so she decides to bring Sherlock Holmes and John Watson with her for extra safety precautions. I mean, would you want to meet a stranger alone at a public place? I think not. So for point number 9, apparently according to the letter, Miss Morstan received a letter describing her to be a wronged woman. She is being framed for a crime she did not commit, is my question. Or is she being framed for a crime she did not commit? Again, read the Sign of the Four, because this is all I'm going to unveil to you as you watch this video. So for point number 10 that I wrote down, along with Miss Morstan's acquaintance Major Sholto, dies on April 28, 1882, with no idea that Captain Morstan was ever in London. And this was in Chapter 3, In Quest of a Solution, page 96 of the Sign of the Four. So, Major Sholto had no idea Mr. Morstan was in London. It was just really surprising to read this. So, you think these guys would keep in touch with one another just to keep tabs on each other's safety. It's just how I see it. That's just logic talking for you from a 2023 perspective. So, as we continue on, we get introduced to this new character named Thaddeus Sholto, which apparently, I think he's a 13-year-old introduced in the 4th chapter of the Sign of the Four. If I'm incorrect about this information, let me know down in the comments below. So, I also wrote down for my notes is that Arthur Morstan had a weak heart and died of a heart attack from a heated argument of a treasure split from India. And apparently this treasure is called the Agra treasure, or the treasure of Agra. A-G-R-A. Agra, not Agrabah. So, anyway, continuing on with point 13. So, Thaddeus tried to hide Arthur Morstan's body after his heart attack. Thad's faithful servant, La Chowder, kept the secret of hearing the commotion of Arthur Morstan's death in Chapter 4, page 102, The Sign of the Four. So, Thaddeus ends up getting framed for a crime he did not commit. Now, let me continue on. For my next point that I wrote down, Thaddeus Sholto and his brother Bartholomew Sholto are identical twins. And they're both bald, short, but again, they're identical twins. And I just thought this was a really intriguing experience. So, Thaddeus and Bartholomew are identical twins. One was murdered in the quarters, only leaving a single drop of blood within chapter 5 of the Sign of the Four. So I noted down that a vegetable type of alkaloid could have been used to poison Bartholomew Sholto. Almost a similar situation with the murders in A Study in Scarlet with Enoch Drebber, or Drebler, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, Enoch Drebber. So I just thought this was a really solid surprise with the twin reveal that Sholto had to go through. Well, Thad Sholto. So as I continued on, I had to write down, so Bartholomew was poisoned with an English wood thorn on the scalp, and now the jewels are missing. And this was from pages 112 and 113, chapter 6 of The Sign of the Four. So there could be some missing treasure going on. Again, there was this beef with Arthur Morstan and Thaddeus when Arthur had his heart attack, but in that moment Thaddeus could have been Bartholomew at the time, and then Bartholomew's servant Lull Chowder could have helped him dispose of Arthur Morstan's body. It's really surprising in my eyes how this story turns out. So for point number 17, as we continue on, so Watson is ordered by Sherlock to return Miss Morstan to her home in Camberwell, which she lives with Mrs. Cecil Forrester. Now, Cecil is a really sweet woman. I really liked how her character was written, but no real notable quotes from her. I just really liked her appearance within some scenes. So as we continue on, Jonathan Small might have some connection to the Sign of the Four. If I'm interpreting chapter 7, page 120 correctly, from the Sign of the Four. So there wasn't like too much I could go on from chapter 7, page 120. That's why I wrote the note like this. And again, I want to keep this review as spoiler free as possible so you can enjoy it and interpret it in your own way. Again, I just love how the Sherlock series writes out environments and they just wrap around you like a warm blanket, and it was just an all-around enjoyable experience in my eyes. So for point number 19, Sherlock, with the hound dog Toby in hand, visits a house with a placard with the name Mordecai Smith on it, from chapter 8, The Baker Street Irregulars, page 123, The Sign of the Four. So continuing on with point 20, so the Bartholomew murder made it to the front page of the newspaper in chapter 8, page 126 of The Sign of the Four. And for point 21, so Holmes finds the wooden-legged man operating Mordecai Smith's boat, Aurora, and chases after him near the end of chapter 10, The Sign of the Four. So for chapter 11, it was just a really wholesome experience, but for the wooden-legged man, Jonathan Small, his like little peg leg was imprinted near the Bartholomew murder scene. Just a little FYI, but I have to say chapter 11, where Mary, Morstan, and Watson have their little moment, it was just so sweet. It was so cute. So my final thoughts: really enjoyable mystery thriller type of story with all of the wonderful twists and turns. This story has The Sign of the Four as a whole was a solid mystery thriller treasure hunt type of story. Like, you had your intense action scenes with the Aurora chase with Jonathan Small and Sherlock. They're on the river just running about trying to get this iron box with like Indian jewels in it, and then it was such a treat. So anyway, yeah, that's my review of The Sign of the Four. Apologies if it seems all over the place. I wanted to keep this review as spoiler free as possible. So if you haven't read Sherlock Holmes, if you want something, a mystery that you can just observe the scenes envelop around you and just get lost in the characters' actions, definitely give Sherlock Holmes a chance. Give it a try. Enjoy it. So anyway, leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy the content from this channel. I'm Kite562 signing out, and what's your favorite story from Sherlock Holmes or by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle? Let me know down in the comments below. This is Kite562 signing out, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. Later.